What is up, YouTube? What is up, Canada? Matt McKeever here. It's been a while since I was on the Canadian Real Estate channel. Hopefully you guys still remember who I am. Smash the like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. And today we're going to be talking about 2022 real estate here in Canada. So I'm going to give you guys some of my thoughts when it comes to interest rates, where prices are maybe headed, maybe certain types of properties to get into or avoid. I'll also give you guys a quick update on what's going on in my world in regards to my personal real estate investing. But before we do any of that, I'd love for you guys to jump in the comment section and let us know, what are your predictions when it comes to the Canadian real estate market, as well as what are your plans in 2022 in regards to the Canadian real estate market? Are you a buyer? Are you a seller? Are you just hodling right now in regards to your portfolio? I'd love to hear, because I've definitely made some big changes in regards to my portfolio this year. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing as well. We'll also talk about interest rates, and I'd love to get your thoughts on interest rates as well, because I think my predictions on interest rates are going to be outside of normal. And I think that's kind of the fun when it comes to predictions, is, you know, being willing to kind of step out on a ledge and say something that's not in line with the consensus, assuming that your opinion's not in line with the consensus. As well, I asked you guys on my Instagram to ask me any real estate questions you've got, or for you to share your predictions with me. So I'll also be going through those. But again, if you didn't get a chance to respond on Instagram, jump into the Facebook or YouTube chat right now. Let us know, what are your predictions, as well as what are your goals when it comes to 2022 in the Canadian real estate market. All right. Now, we'll leave interest rates and my predictions in regards to appreciation or depreciation from a price point in the Canadian market till the end here. But let's talk on a few other subject matters that I think will likely get a little bit less attention when everyone else is trying to look into their crystal ball. And like any prediction, obviously this comes with a caveat. I can't actually see the future. I wish I could. We maybe wouldn't be here if I could predict the future. So anyways, obviously I'm not going to shoot 100% on this, and hindsight's the only thing that's 2020 when it comes to these predictions. But let's first talk about taxes and regulations. This is something that, if you've been paying attention on my Instagram or been listening to me maybe on some of my unfiltered YouTube channel content, you've maybe heard me talk about this or speculate that while right now, up until very recently at least, it sounded like we weren't going to be really messed with as Canadian real estate investors, but I've always been suspicious of that. And I'm suspicious of it for a multitude of reasons. But the biggest one is just, I think landlords and real estate investors in general, we make for a very convenient scapegoat. And so personally, I suspect that, you know, the government, when push comes to shove and the average Canadian's upset about how unaffordable real estate is, as well as how unaffordable even just the average rent price is for a unit in major metropolitan cities, I think they're going to come for us. And so if you guys weren't paying attention, I recently shared on some of my Instagram stories an article from Better Dwelling that essentially was outlining a memo. This isn't the right term, but essentially a memo that was put forward by the federal Liberal Party, essentially outlining perhaps some of their intentions when it comes to us real estate investors. Now, will any of these come to pass in the next year? Again, I can't predict the future. However, what sort of things do I think are maybe more likely to happen versus less likely? I think that flippers make for a very easy target. So I certainly could see and understand, while I may not agree with it, I can understand why the government and politicians in particular will want to go after flippers. Now, odds are the sort of regulation they're going to put into place won't necessarily write out, ban, or outlaw flipping, because that would really grind our real estate market to a complete stop. However, the most likely sort of regulation or policy we could see enacted is some sort of surplus tax or a just additional tax when it comes to flippers or anyone essentially that's owned a property for a year or less. I think that, you know, whether it happens this year or next year, there's a very good chance that we could see it before the next federal election, some sort of regulation around that. And certainly if you're a flipper or an aspiring flipper, you need to just really be paying attention to this stuff. Now, again, that doesn't mean you should not become a flipper. It doesn't mean that you should immediately panic and pivot your business model, but you absolutely need to be paying attention. And maybe you should even be sitting down with your, competent tax accountant and maybe just planning for some what if scenarios, or understanding maybe what are some pivots if these come to pass, these sort of rules or regulations. Now, one of the other ones that, during essentially the most recent election that everyone promised that they weren't going to do, if I remember correctly, was taxing personal capital gains when it comes to your personal residence. Again, I think that there's a chance we could see this in the next couple of years, but I don't think that we're going to see that this year. So if I had to predict, I don't think that, capital gains on your personal residence will get taxed in 2022. However, I could see them going after flippers much more. Now, another piece of policy that's been kind of forecasted for us is this idea of essentially taxing surplus rent increases. Now, exactly what that means, I think the devil's really in the details here, but certainly for BRRRR investors, there could be serious implications in regards to this sort of policy. Remember, BRRRR, essentially the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. I love it as a business model. However, if we all of a sudden see government really taxing a huge amount of surplus rent increases, that's going to impact BRRRR investors dramatically, as well as just investors that like to buy turnkey rentals, essentially because, again, I suspect that we'd see that pass along. But again, this is where it could actually get really messy from a policy perspective. We'll probably do a whole nother video just discussing some of the policies proposed. But that certainly sounds like something that I could see being popular with the average person, the average Canadian. However, I don't actually think it would impact rent prices dramatically in any way. Because again, if you need to get a certain rent and the government's taking a big chunk from your business model, odds are people are just going to ask for even more rent, assuming that the market will bear it. So I don't know if that's going to work out to anyone's betterment other than maybe the government's coffers, but it's definitely something, again, you as a BRRRR investor need to be paying attention to. Now, moving on from kind of taxes and regulation, let's talk about what else I see kind of going on in 2022 from a real estate investing perspective. Unfortunately, and I've mentioned this both on my Matt McKeever Unfiltered YouTube channel, as well as I've mentioned it to you guys here in the past, I kind of think lockdown season, this idea of restrictions, it's probably here to stay for a while, regardless of what you think's going on in the narrative. And I'll try not even say that word that constantly gets me demonetized and hated on YouTube. But certainly, it seems like there's a pattern emerging here that every winter we could see it being more difficult to run short-term rentals. And this certainly impacts Airbnb as well. If we're not seeing, foreigners, Americans being able to come to Canada easily to vacation, to travel, again, that restricts the overall demand likely for short-term rentals. Now, at the same time, we'll probably see a little bit of balancing out here where Canadians will want to take on more domestic travel if it becomes a greater pain in the ass in regards to them being able to, go on vacation. But I still think that this is a net loser for short-term rentals. So again, if you're planning to jump into Airbnb, or if your Airbnb's been struggling for the last 2 years, and I totally understand why it may be, you may want to sharpen your pencil and really make sure that you understand your underlying business model, because again, I think there are real consequences here, particularly if this drags on for 2022 into 2023, so on and so forth. Again, I can't predict what happens with government policy, but I certainly could see this at least in one of the potential timelines that we're facing. Moving on from that, let's quickly talk about what I think the average investor is going to be looking for or targeting in 2022. Then we'll get into interest rates. Then we'll get into my appreciation prediction. But again, I'd love to hear from you guys. What are your predictions for interest rates here in Canada, as well as what are your predictions when it comes to, the actual price of real estate? Do you see it going up further? Do you see it dropping? Let me know in the comment section on Facebook or YouTube. And I'll also be getting to all of your questions and suggestions from Instagram in a couple minutes. But I personally suspect, and I personally believe, that we'll likely see a lot of Canadian real estate investors essentially demanding greater returns. Now, why do I think that they're going to demand greater returns when it comes to investing? Well, there is a lot of capital out there chasing a lot of investing, which naturally drives down the returns that people want. However, if we continue to see inflation kind of move in the direction that I personally suspect, as well as I think a lot of you out there suspect, if we believe that real inflation, let's even take government statistics and say it's 6 or 7%, I kind of think it might even be closer to double digits these days. It's natural that investors are going to want to get a return that's equal to or greater than that. Now, in the last year, appreciation made sure that anyone that was holding real estate did well for themselves, or anyone really even taking on short-term flips still did well for themselves, because real estate seems to be operating under the same philosophy as what Bitcoiners talk about, which is NGU, number go up metrics, or number go up math. And this kind of leads me into my prediction here on where I see real estate prices going in the future. Personally, because there's so much capital out there chasing just any sort of return, but I also think real estate investors are going to be demanding greater returns in order to try and keep up with inflation. I personally think that this is, again, a perfect storm to see a squeeze when it comes to real estate prices here in Canada. Now, this isn't necessarily good for the average investor or good for the average Canadian, but it's just kind of a byproduct of our monetary policy. It's not just Canada that's fallen victim to this. It's pretty much any Western democracy that has fiat currency. It turns out that's essentially all of us. So if I had to predict, I would be very confident putting like my batting average on seeing double-digit returns from an appreciation standpoint in just about any and all real estate markets. Now, if I want to get a little bit more detailed there, it doesn't seem unreasonable unless a black swan event occurs that we could see another 20% appreciation. Now, if you're following other influencers, if you're following other analysts when it comes to real estate investing here in Canada, a lot of them are probably saying something similar to me. So that's not necessarily anything shocking. But when you think back that, in the last year, some markets already saw 40%, some even greater than 40% appreciation, it certainly feels unsustainable. But again, what's going to actually fix our monetary policy? I don't see how they can fix it. And that leads me into the last prediction I want to talk with you guys about, which is interest rates. Now, if you've been following a lot of, mortgage analysts, a lot of, again, real estate analysts, a lot of people seem to believe that we'll likely see 3, 4, maybe even 5 interest rate hikes, getting us up 25 basis points per hike into somewhere around the 1% increase when it comes to Bankers Prime. Now, personally, you guys have heard me go on and on about this in the past, but they may pretend to be hawks, but I really do believe that they're doves here. So this is the most extreme prediction I've got for you tonight. While everyone else is going to be saying 0.75, 1, maybe 1.25 in the most extreme cases of predictions for the next, year in 2022. I'm personally, and this is aggressive. So again, do your own due diligence, do your own research here. I'd be surprised if we saw more than a 25 basis point increase throughout the year. Now, again, maybe they actually do a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it just seems like we're in such a volatile market. Everyone's addicted to cheap debt. You can look at the statistics yourselves in regards to, total debt here in Canada, total personal debt, right? Mortgage debt, all of it's just skyrocketing through the roof. And if we were to see, honestly, a 1% increase or 100 basis points, I think it would be too detrimental. I just don't see how central bankers are going to be able to actually walk the walk that they're currently talking. Now, again, that's the most extreme prediction I've got. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, not only on appreciation, but let me know what your thoughts are on interest rates. I'll get to any of your questions in the comment section in a second. But like I mentioned, I actually asked a bunch of you, what are your thoughts and what are your predictions and questions for me in regards to 2022 in the Canadian real estate market? So I'm going to pull it up here on Instagram. So first question, finding motivated sellers. Is it getting any harder? Yes and no. You know what I mean? It certainly, there's as much or more competition for people looking for motivated sellers. Certainly there's a lot more people doing flyers than there were, 5 years ago. However, I still think that there's a lot of great opportunities here in Canada. And as we see prices increase, we may see, sellers choose to want to, for sale by owner simply because the 5% commission or the 4.5% commission that you're likely going to carve out for realtors is going to look like a bigger and bigger, net real number, right? And again, regardless of whether that's actually the smart choice for sellers, I think that we're going to see more and more people being tempted by it just because they're going to think that they're going to save so much in commission. At the same time, it's all about just understanding the underlying motivation, right, of the individual seller. It's something we've talked about at length. Are you able to create a win-win? Are you actually solving some sort of unique problem? If you're not trying to solve a unique problem and you're trying to buy off market, odds are that either, the seller is going to choose to not go with you and sell on market, or there's going to be someone else that's going to be able to better problem solve. So again, you need to really focus on how can I create value in this transaction, not just for myself, but for the seller as well. And that really comes down to being creative. So don't just be focused on getting the absolute lowest price, particularly in these hot markets. Maybe you should be looking at things like vendor take-back mortgages or other ways to structure your purchase or acquisition of a property in order to make it work. But again, right now in this volatile market where we've seen massive appreciation and where rents aren't keeping pace with the appreciation of the underlying real estate assets, you need to really make sure you understand your business model and make sure the numbers work, Don't just be blindly buying real estate, in my opinion, at this point, and hoping it just naturally goes up. Another question we had here was office buildings and their future. Now, this isn't an area I specialize in. However, I'm willing to give you a hot take on it. When it comes to office buildings and things of that nature, again, I'm personally of the opinion that telecommuting, that people choosing to work from home, that social distancing, that lockdowns aren't probably just going to disappear magically at the start of 2022. Although fingers crossed, I'm more than happy to be wrong on this. But if I'm not wrong, this is going to put more and more negative pressure on office buildings. And so the only thing that would be particularly attractive to me about acquiring office buildings would be if there's an opportunity and a very clear and clear-cut option here to convert them. So certainly there's going to be some huge conversion opportunities because, like we mentioned, I personally suspect to see Canadian real estate prices continue to go up. I don't think I'm alone in that prediction either. So it seems natural that people are going to be looking for ways to, find value adds to a property. And one of the value adds may be taking commercial or office space and seeing if you can convert it into residential real estate, because it's likely becoming its highest best use unless you're really in downtown urban environments or brand new construction office spaces and things of that nature, where the math likely just isn't going to work. But again, that's just my opinion on office spaces, and I'm definitely not an expert on it. Someone snuck in here a NFT question: why people should or shouldn't be wary of NFTs. Best books you read in 2021. So you should definitely be cautious getting into NFTs right now. We're going through a major bull market, bull cycle, whatever you want to call it. And while that's fantastic for me and my portfolio, I think there's a lot of people just blindly buying something, blindly betting on something, and thinking that it'll just naturally go up the same way that, CryptoPunks did in 2021 or the way Bored Ape Yacht Club did in 2021. In my opinion, those are two very unique edge case scenarios. And if you're not doing deep diligence, if you're not really one of those hardcore degens that's constantly on Discord and Twitter, I think you're going to get left in the dust, or understand that you're just coming to the NFT table to gamble. Nothing wrong with gambling, but you need to be really honest with yourself that you're likely not an investor. And, if you're simply looking to get like one hot tip from me, again, you're probably not putting in enough research and due diligence in order to be able to consistently outperform the average NFT investor. And I don't think things actually look that great for the average NFT investor, but there's really no statistics or data for us to clearly track. Now, some of the best books I read in 2021, there was a ton of great books. To be honest, though, nothing really stood out. If I was to pick one piece of content that I enjoyed more than I think just about anything in 2021, it would actually be the Martyr Made podcast. So I'd really encourage you guys, if you haven't checked out Daryl Cooper's podcast, Martyr Made, go check it out. He also does another podcast with Jocko, where they essentially, it's called The Unraveling, and they kind of go through historical periods in time and unravel complicated threads. Now, both those podcasts are amazing, but if you're only going to listen to one, I really encourage you to listen to Martyr Made. In fact, the most recent episode is on the entire Epstein affair, and it's a fascinating deep dive into a subject matter that I think very few people are familiar or intelligent on. So again, really encourage you guys to check that out. Another question here: tax on unreasonable rental increases after reno and the new LIB policy. Yeah, we've already touched upon that briefly here, but there certainly is a great risk that we could see that sort of policy enacted. Now, exactly what that looks like and how long it lasts, really, this is where the devil's in the details. Does it apply to me as the owner? But what if I immediately resell that property as a flipper, but I did end up getting higher rents and it's kind of a turnkey rental? Does that tax pass on to the new owner, even though they weren't responsible? How long does that tax last? It's really complicated. And until we really see policy drafted and enacted, I'm not confident on predicting what it looks like, but I will predict that it's not going to help anyone. I feel very confident in saying that. Just like just about all government policy. The parasite class just isn't very good at being efficient allocators of capital. It's just how it's always been. It's how it will always be. Another question here: your advice for first-time home buyers who currently live and work in the GTA. You're not going to be happy with this advice, but personally, in my opinion, if you're a first-time home buyer and you're struggling to break into the GTA market, one, I don't blame you. Two, I'm going to call into question whether the GTA market's the actual right market for you. So do you absolutely have to live in this extremely high cost of living area where you don't even get the same benefits as you used to? in a pre-lockdown society, there was actually probably good arguments for culture and your ability to interact with, all sorts of unique groups of people and, sample different cultures in a more unique way than you could maybe in the middle of nowhere, Northern Ontario, like where this guy lives right now. However, that's not the world we live in today. And unless you expect things to dramatically change in 2022, I would strongly encourage you to look outside of your comfort zone, which is to look outside of the GTA real estate market. So again, it may actually involve switching gears from a career position or switching employers or taking a transfer. But I personally think that you'll find a lot more bang for your buck and get a much better lifestyle outside of the GTA. Just my hot take. Now, if you are going to be breaking into the GTA market, I guess one thing that we can touch upon is, compared to freehold dwellings or townhomes, condos have been getting a little bit less respect than those markets. So they're kind of like the Rodney Dangerfield at this point of real estate. They're just not getting the same respect as everyone else. So if you were looking to break in, there may be opportunities there. If you are looking to break in, I really encourage you to reach out to our local expert, Emma Pace. She's on the YouTube channel once a month, breaking down the GTA markets for us. And again, that may be an option, but it's tough to, make sense of a house hack or even just a personal residence in the GTA unless you are willing to pay that premium. For me, I don't see the math making sense. Next question here. How can we buy your merch? Well, first, appreciate the question, Tyler. And you guys didn't notice, I'm rocking a new Problems or Profits hat. In the past, we had some ways where you could buy Problems or Profits merch through YouTube, but we weren't really happy with the quality, and it didn't seem like many people were buying it anyway, so we decided to just scratch that. Right now, as frustrating as it is, the only way you can buy Problems or Profits merch is to literally come to the Citadel, and I've got boxes and boxes of merch. We've got mugs, all that great stuff, and we can work out a deal. There's going to be some opportunities for you guys in 2022 if you want to find your way to the Citadel to come hang out with me. We'll host some masterminds. We've got some really cool events planned. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, that you've got me on Facebook, and that maybe you've even subbed to the Matt McKeever Unfiltered channel, where I'll be sharing a lot more of what we're going to be doing in the future. So again, really encourage you guys to check that stuff out. But unfortunately, right now, there's no easy way to get a hold of Problems or Profits merch. And to be honest, I'm okay with that. I like the idea that it's a little exclusive or hard to get. We're not easy. But again, we'll try and make it a little bit easier for you in the future. Last question I've got here on Instagram, then I'll jump into your questions in the comments. So again, I'd love to hear your predictions, your thoughts, and hit me up with any questions because it's been a while since we did this. But last question, when house hacking, what are the regulations I need to be most careful aware of? Any tips? When we're talking about house hacking, presumably you're either moving into a large single family property and renting out bedrooms, or you're moving into a multifamily property and go and live in one of the units and rent out the rest. Both are great ways to subsidize your cost of living. I strongly encourage people to do so, particularly in the current trying real estate market that we have, where prices are just ridiculous. It's one of the ways to be able to sleep easier at night, in my opinion. It's also important just because of the volatility, right? What if you lose your job? What if, lockdowns or other government policies essentially make your job impossible to do? Or what if certain mandates force you out of your current position for whatever reason? Well, house hacking or having some multiple income streams from your principal residence is a great option. Now, there aren't any real policies or regulations I think you need to be aware of, other than make sure that the zoning allows for whatever you want to do. So if you're going to be living with roommates, usually that's pretty straightforward. Usually there's not a lot of restrictions in most Canadian municipalities or cities. But again, familiarize yourself, because as we say in real estate all the time, it's all about location, location, location. So it's really important you understand your regional rules as a real estate investor. Now, most people they want to just quickly ask their realtor about it, or they'll ask a random real estate influencer like me. But at the end of the day, it's really up to you to do your own research. And certainly I'd be wary of buying any sort of illegal units right now to house hack, particularly if you don't plan on actually staying in the illegal unit yourself. Now, again, each city and municipality is different in regards to their level of enforcement. But I just think in general, as time progresses, we've constantly seen an increasing of the bureaucracy and rules and regulations enforced upon us as real estate investors. And I think you need to be cognizant of that. So for me, I'd want to make sure that if I was buying real estate in 2022 to house hack, that it was up to code, that, the zoning rules essentially were in alignment with whatever I wanted to implement, Or if not, I might make that a clause or part of my due diligence process before going firm on that acquisition. So that was all the questions on Instagram. I'm going to quickly hit up any of the questions here in the chat. Appreciate those of you that have smashed the like button, those of you that have been subscribing, whether from day one or you just found the channel and subscribed today. Certainly appreciate you guys. Seeing some love in the comment section. Appreciate it. Steven's asking, what up, Peter? How's life up north? It's doing pretty well up here, up north. And if you guys are interested in learning more about what I'm doing in my personal life or what I'm doing with the Citadel, which is the property, the compound that I recently moved to, go check out my Matt McKeever Unfiltered channel. We'll be going live at 8:20 Eastern Standard Time tonight. And, I'll be filling you guys in on some of my personal goals, some of the personal challenges I'm going to be taking on in 2022. I'll give you a little bit more of a sneak peek about what's going on here at the Citadel and what my plans are for 2022. HD Day says both buying, selling, LOL. Sounds like you're flipping, and that makes a lot of sense in this market. Let's just fingers crossed that the rules and regulations don't destroy your business model. Appreciate the love, Greg. What else is going on here? One from Facebook. I think some will be priced out of the real estate, will be priced out. Yeah, certainly there's going to be a lot of people priced out of the real estate market. A lot of people already have been. But again, if we see what I'm predicting, another 20% increase in 2022, yeah, it's going to only become more and more difficult for people to afford real estate. And, if we see an interest rate increase, that may cool the markets, that may nudge prices down. But at the same time, from an affordability perspective, it's probably going to be, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, which means that you're not really going to make any progress. But again, that's why it's so important you guys understand your business model, that you've really ran your numbers, you've done your own due diligence, because no one's ever going to care more about your money than you. And if someone else does care more about your money than you, shame on you, because it's only a matter of time before either they lose interest, they take advantage, or something falls apart. Ryan's asking, stating real estate will continue to climb, especially if these lockdowns keep happening. Seems like a reasonable prediction. Prices can only go up with the money printing. Yes, Benjamin, I agree with that. And that's a big factor of why I see likely a 20% appreciation in 2022. What's up, Arthur? Appreciate the love. Personal res tax would screw average homeowners. Absolutely, Holden. I'm not saying it's a good policy, but it's certainly a policy I could see the government enacting, because at this point in time, the housing market is literally on fire. The floor pricing, the entry-level prices is lava. It's insane. And it feels unsustainable. But at the same time, what's actually going to fix our monetary policy? We're not going to go back. We're not going to go off a fiat standard. And so because it's all Fugazi, if it's fiat, I think that the snowball can keep rolling for a while. But hey, we'll find out together in 2022. Would this affect corporation being taxable at a higher level? Again, we haven't actually seen them roll out the exact rules and policies, but if anything, I expect that they'd go after corporations that enact the same, like whether it's rent increases or flipping real estate as much or more than individuals, because again, from just a narrative perspective, right? It makes so much sense as a politician to be like, we're going to go after those greedy corporations and rich cat CEOs. And, the average person's like, yeah, that sounds smart. It's not actually how any of this stuff really works. But again, just the word corporation sounds, at least the way we've all been indoctrinated, it sounds like big, it sounds powerful, it sounds like we're at a disadvantage as an individual. So certainly I'd expect any rules or policies they enact in regards to trying to curtail the profits that real estate investors make will apply as much or more to corporations than to individual investors. Still no answer on the supply problem. So I think you're bang on, up. Absolutely. What do you think about Timmins? Well, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Timmins already do like a 40% appreciation in the last year? So yeah, I think that it's likely going to increase. I wouldn't expect another 40% increase. If anything, maybe less than 20%, because I just don't understand what's driving that crazy price appreciation. Now, a lot of these more rural markets, they simply didn't hit the appreciation cycle as early or as hard as a lot of other markets. So near the end of the year, I think a lot of them were playing catch up, and that'd be kind of my hot take on like the Timmins, or I see someone's asking about Sault Ste. Marie. Very similar in my opinion. I did mildly consider getting into the Sault Ste. Marie market simply because it's kind of halfway on the drive from London, Ontario to my new property. But I personally haven't dabbled in it. So again, I don't have any real insider knowledge or personal research I've done, but I suspect it'll do as well as your average Canadian market likely. Let's see. Kevin's got a question. Any experience with the BRRRR method in Ottawa? As successful as London? Yes, I think that there's a lot of potential in Ottawa. Personally, Gatineau Hall, you guys have heard me chat about it in the past. That market, especially, I haven't looked at like where prices went in the winter here, but like pre-winter, it looked very similar to London or other markets like the Brantfords, the Windsors, in my opinion. And because of that, I'm kind of bullish on it simply because from a rent multiplier perspective, right? Like when you're trying to get the 1% rule or as close to the 1% rule as possible, I think that it's easier to accomplish there. Now, again, you're getting into Quebec versus Ontario. There's certain extra rules, regulations, pain in the ass factors, is my understanding, being a landlord in Quebec versus Canada, or versus Ontario. However, again, if you're willing to take on that additional hassle or potential risk factor, I think that there's probably as good of returns or maybe even better returns in those markets versus Ottawa proper. But certainly, again, well, if we take a step back and just look at everything that's going on, all the new rules and regulations and policies and stuff, all those require more government positions and jobs, I think, right? And it's natural tendency for those to kind of accumulate near one's capital. So the capital city, that is. Holden, have you ever added a basement unit in London? Is the city hard to work with? I certainly don't think the city's easy to work with in London, but I also don't think they're the worst city to work with. I think that any real estate investor, though, going into 2022 needs to be factoring in slightly longer timelines than you would have pre-2020, simply because of the new reality we live in, where, again, lockdowns and social distancing and all these things can really slow down the process. Now, again, certain cities have adapted better than other cities. I think it's really important that you don't even take old perspectives, though. You need to really be talking to investors that did it in 2021 in order to understand what the market's like today, because things are changing really fast. Ruben, 20% appreciation. That's my guess. Love to hear everyone else's. All right, guys. Well, I think I've covered most of the questions I've seen here, and appreciate you guys jumping in on this live stream. I know it's been a while since I've been on the YouTube channel. If you guys enjoyed this, of course, smash that like button, hit subscribe. If you haven't checked out and subscribed to my Matt McKeever Unfiltered channel, one, I'd really appreciate it. Two, I think we're doing some cool stuff that you might want to stay abreast of. We're definitely going to be playing some really interesting events, one of a kind. Kind of my goal is to get back to 2018 vibes when we were just hosting these crazy events that no one else had ever tried or done before. And I got a lot of personal satisfaction from it. I think those of you that attended got a lot of personal satisfaction from it. And I'm just looking forward to 2022. One last thing I want to leave you guys with is, regardless of what goes on in the market, at the end of the day, life is a choose your own adventure. And if you haven't learned anything from the last 2 years, understand that you're actually probably in more control than you realize. But it's just a matter of you being willing to stick your neck out, step up, take on those challenges, those perceived risks, however you want to frame it. But again, don't just wait back for things to go back to normal in order to get control of your financial lives. I think that's the biggest mistake I've seen people make over the last 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean blindly jump in and just buy any type of real estate. You still absolutely need to do your own due diligence, but don't just sit on the sidelines hoping someday things go back to normal. This is the new normal. We might as well accept it and roll with the punches. And again, we were never guaranteed that things were going to be exactly the way we wanted. That's never how life worked. We've never lived in a completely nerfed society, and I hope that we never do actually find ourselves under those circumstances. And so it's important you take personal responsibility. It's the start of a new year. You don't need a new year to take on new challenges, but it's a great opportunity just because a lot of us are coming with new, fresh mentalities, fresh perspectives, coming off of the holiday season. Really wish you guys the best. Again, appreciate you guys hanging out with me tonight, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks, guys. Again, if you're watching this after the live, let me know in the comment section, what are your thoughts? What are your predictions for 2022? Because I really am curious, and maybe we'll come back in a year and we'll compare notes and see how we did. Again, my boldest prediction is in regards to interest rates. You guys can scroll back to about the middle of the video if you want to hear that. Thanks, guys.